OPB Podcasts.
From the Gert Boyle studio, it's OPB Politics Now for Friday, May 22nd. The primary election is over. Oregon voters shot down a gas tax proposal, and Christine Drazan won the Republican nod for governor. That sets up a rematch between Drazan and Governor Tina Kotek in the fall. Plus, across the state, voters weighed in on county commission races, legislative races, and much more. Let's recap. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB Politics reporter Bryce Dole.
I'm OPB Politics reporter Lauren Dake.
I'm OPB Education reporter Elizabeth Miller.
Lauren, let's start with the biggest race of the night. The last time Governor Kotek and Christine Drazan faced off, the governor won by only about a few percent, less than 4%, right? But of course, Betsy Johnson was in that race, so it was a very different race. How do you think the dynamics of this race will be different?
I think there are a few things in Drazan's corner this time around that she didn't have in 2022. First, like you said, there's no Betsy Johnson, and that could help her. Drazan supporters who I talked to this week during the primary, they said they felt like Johnson siphoned a lot of the financial backing from business groups that would have otherwise gone to Drazan. And then I spoke to Drazan yesterday, and she said she felt like during that 2022 election cycle, she spent a lot of time ensuring that Betsy Johnson wasn't gaining momentum in rural counties in Oregon. So that forced her to go to a lot of those more rural counties. This time around, Drazan will almost certainly focus a lot more of her time and her energy in Portland and Multnomah County, and she'll need those votes if she's going to win. The other thing is, this time she has Kotek's actual record to run against. Last time it was a hypothetical. This time Kotek has been governing for 4 years, and Drazan can hammer on the fact that we still have some really big unresolved issues.
And I can only imagine Drazan will really need some of those moderate voters in the heavily populated areas like the suburbs and Portland, especially given that this is a midterm and, experts are expecting, a lot of Democrats to, come out to the polls, come out to the ballot box in response to the Trump administration, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the fact that it's a midterm and that generally doesn't bode well for the party in power means that Drazan's going to have to really cut through a lot of noise to convince moderate Democrats and non-affiliated voters that she is the right choice for the right time.
And did Drazan's primary give you any sense about how her campaign would approach the general election?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's going to focus a lot on affordability, the housing crisis, taxes, the governor's first 4 years. And Kotek is going to likely keep pivoting that back up to the federal government and trying to paint Drazan as sort of a make American great again politician as much as she possibly can. And we saw that yesterday when the governor released her first campaign ad. Here is a little bit of that.
Trump's agenda is wrong.
Any federal takeover with military troops in our state is a threat to communities across Oregon. I communicated that to the president directly.
But while Tina Kotek stands up to Trump, Christine Drazan stood by him, defending his illegal troop deployment, siding with him on abortion rights, vote by mail, and his war in Iran jacking up our gas prices. That's the choice. A governor who says hell no, or Christine Drazan, who will let Donald Trump do whatever the hell he wants.
So pretty clear there where this campaign is going to go for the Democratic candidate. And yesterday, like I said, I spoke to Drazan. She held this press conference in downtown Portland. And I asked her about how she was going to appeal to those moderate Democrats, those unaffiliated voters that she will need to win this race. And here's a bit of that conversation. There's a lot of background noise because, again, we were in downtown Portland. How MAGA is Christine Drazan? That's a question. That's the Northeast Portland unaffiliated voter question.
Yeah. This race is going to hinge on the people that are open-minded and aren't satisfied with the direction things have been going. For people whose number one issue is an issue that they're already perfectly aligned with Tina, that's what these races are for. They have their candidate. And so my focus is going to be on talking to the people that are sincerely looking for alternatives and that they're not so steeped in national politics that their number one issue is going to be a national issue. I will partner with whoever supports my vision to help Oregon, and I will fight tooth and nail against anybody that harms my vision to support Oregon.
It's always tricky for a Republican in this state to win statewide elected office, which is partly why they do it so rarely, because you could hear in this answer, Drazan is trying to walk this very fine line. She cannot alienate her conservative base, who probably do support the president quite a bit, and yet she needs to capture the moderate voters. So it's going to be tricky for her, and it's tricky for all Republicans in Oregon.
Mm-hmm. Let's turn to the other really big statewide issue, this primary. The overwhelming defeat of Measure 120. This was a big one people were voting on. On Election Day, we sent reporters out around the state to talk to voters about this issue, about this measure. They almost universally said they were voting against it, right? Mostly due to the high cost of living, the high cost of housing, sky high gas prices that we're all, seeing, due to the war in Iran. Here is Carl Herman. He spoke with our colleague out in Pendleton in Eastern Oregon.
I'm not only just a driver and a citizen, I'm also a farmer. Right now, diesel is about to the max of being able to even forget about a profit and a big profit just to break even.
Lauren, pretty much everyone expected this measure to fail, right? But I kind of wonder, were they expecting a margin this big? The last time that I looked, more than 83% of voters, voted against this measure. What do you think?
I expected it to fail and was still pretty surprised by the very clear margin right away. It was dramatic. And I think it was a real win for Republicans whose messaging has been Oregonians are struggling already right now with affordability and rising costs and cannot pay more at the gas pump. And then also, we've talked about this on the podcast a few times, Bryce, but once the gas tax landed on the ballot, Democrats who had spent months trying to pass it, they had held a special session, they had put so much time and effort into it, they basically mounted no campaign in favor of the gas tax once it was on the ballot. They just ignored it because I think they knew it would be unpopular. So it was expected to fail. It really did. I think it was a win for Republicans and not a great look for Democrats.
Right. And I was struck by, Governor Tina Kotek came out yesterday or this might have been the night before, I'm not sure, and immediately, blamed the measure's failure on President Trump and the war in Iran. She said that the war basically has caused gas prices to rise so much that it was, in her words, impossible for voters to pass right now. Republicans, like you said, they very quickly are seizing on this as a win for them and are criticizing Democrats for how they've handled this issue and trying to, levy new taxes and fees. I reached House Republican leader Lucetta Elmer while she was in the airport yesterday, or 2 days ago, sorry. Here's what she had to say.
I think they've said loud and clear, more taxes on this issue isn't the solution. And so they want to see a pivot. I don't see that the majority party has really given any other solutions to a pivot. It seems that, they continue to want to just try the tax route.
For now, this sends lawmakers back to the drawing board. It's been nearly 2 years since they started down this road to trying to fix all of these transportation funding problems. It just feels like it's never going to end at this point. And they plan to take it up again in next year's session. But when I was talking to lawmakers yesterday, they just all said how the state handles this issue will just be heavily contingent upon who, again, wins that governor's race. Now, you would think that the gas tax failing pointed to this overall idea that Oregon voters were just not in the mood for new taxes. But I was surprised by this. A lot of local tax measures actually did pass, right, Liz? Mm-hmm. When it came to schools, it seemed like the picture was kind of mixed. give us like a high-level summary of kind of what you found in your reporting over the last couple of days.
Yeah, so 10 Oregon school districts had bonds or levies on the ballot this May. 5 of them were levies. These are things to pay for district operations, staff, electives like art and music. And then the bonds are for building upgrades and repairs. And the thing about these 5 bonds that were on the ballot is that they also came with matching state grants. So if voters passed them, districts could basically double what they make from the bond with state funds. But it was basically 50-50. Half of the measures failed, half of them passed. The levies that passed weren't necessarily new taxes, but renewals like those in Ashland and Riverdale. And the bonds that passed were in Sweet Home and Cascade. But one of the levies that failed was in Newburgh. And when I talked to Newburgh Superintendent Dave Parker, he immediately cited the gas tax as one of the reasons why voters didn't support them.
I mean, I think we had significant headwinds against us this time around with the gas tax and some of the challenges going on in Washington, D.C., and just the cost of things. I'm certain that had an impact.
And can you dive deeper into, I guess, some of the more interesting bonds and levies that you were looking into? What stood out to you? What was the goal around like what they were raising money for? Yeah, I mean, sticking with Newburgh, Newburgh and Canby, they both had levies that were about filling millions of dollars in funding gaps. And, Newburgh, they really wanted, the stakes were high. The stakes were high for them. Because this levy did not pass, 17 and a half teaching positions will be cut. 10 support staff positions will be cut. Class sizes are going to increase. And they're also, like a lot of schools, districts in Oregon, taking up conversations about consolidating schools and closing schools. And they're kind of going to be restarting a conversation that was paused. And then in Canby, I mean, they had to cut 74 staff positions last year. And so they were already coming into this year in a pretty rough place. Short-staffed.
Exactly. And so now with this, their levy didn't pass either. And so they had to lay off another 60 positions.
Wow.
And the stat that really sticks out to me is that the district says this represents more than 25% of their workforce, a quarter. And you think about how in a place like Canby, that affects the economy, that affects the community.
Everything.
Canby Superintendent Jennifer Patterson, though, she remained hopeful. She shared a message on the district's Facebook page as it started to look like the measure would fail.
We will find a way. We'll find a way through this, and we'll continue to advocate. We'll continue to just commit to putting our students in the center and finding all creative solutions that we can collectively pursue.
And what's really interesting, I mean, all of education is interesting, but now both of those districts are planning for furlough days next year. And that's notable because of Governor Kotek's instructional time executive order that she announced back in April, which was very anti-furlough days. And so the thing is, if a district adopts furlough days for next school year, they'll now have to find a way to add that time back to the calendar in the future. But I think it just points to school districts have these levers they can pull to make up for funding gaps, and furlough days aren't one of them, according to the governor. But according to school districts, they still are. But I do want to mention one bright spot in all of the results, the Athena Weston School District in Umatilla. In November 2025, they put a measure on the ballot to replace a bond that expires this year. It failed. They wanted to raise a rate that voters had been paying for since, I think, 2016. But then they came back to voters on Tuesday with the same tax rate that they've had. No tax increase. Magic words, right?
Yeah. Right.
And it passed. And now they're going to be able to build a new CTE, this career technical education building with modern art studios and science classrooms and repairing and upgrading a 56-year-old shop building.
Wow.
So not all bad news.
Right. I have to wonder if all of these local school districts, they have to go to local voters and ask for money. Do you think that this speaks to a broader issue just about like statewide education funding in general? Like isn't money for K through 12 schools supposed to come from the state generally?
Yes, that is the case. But you see, I mean, one example, Riverdale, they've had a levy for years, and they have expressed to their voters, to their community, that the state is is not keeping up with the rising costs. And so we're coming to you. And on Tuesday, voters said, yep, we'll keep paying. But not every community has it like that. Parker, the Newburgh superintendent, said it feels like the state has shifted its priorities. Education used to make up a much larger percentage of the general fund dollars than it does now. But now there are other services that the state has served at a higher proportion: public safety, human services. So in Newburgh, they're going to raise class sizes. In some elementary schools, classes will increase to 30 students.
If the levy would have passed, we would have left that alone. There's still some cuts that we would have made no matter what, because of even with the levy, there's still a challenge where, Oregon schools are being underfunded and have been underfunded for 20 years, maybe 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Liz, can I ask you a follow-up question to this? Like, what does it mean when, class sizes are larger? Like, what is the potential impact of that?
Yeah, there's the research has been mixed on like whether this actually affects outcomes, but I think what you see when you have these larger class sizes is you see a teacher who might not have the assistant that they had in their classroom trying to serve all 30 of those students.
Yeah, they got their hands full.
Literally.
Yeah.
And then even, this is elementary school, they're going to see some big increases, but middle school class sizes are already high in Newburgh, and high school is going to increase too. And you think about what a student needs at those different ages, and like elementary school, it might be, more one-on-one and, helping to get those concepts. But when you think about in high school, a larger class size might mean that a student doesn't make a connection with a staff member that keeps them engaged, keeps them interested in being at school. So again, the research is mixed, but generally when you think about a school, you want students to feel like there are adults there that can pay attention to them, that know their name, that can keep track of their learning.
Right,
exactly.
Right. So let's tie this back in politically. In this election cycle, how big of an issue do you expect that education funding and just like the state schools will be just heading into this election cycle? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, so now that we know who our candidates are, I went back and looked at the story I wrote on the governor's race in education back in 22. And some of the things Kotek and Drazan were talking about then are still on the table now, still unresolved, as Lauren was saying. But funding has overshadowed those unresolved issues like graduation requirements. Plus, we've been talking about Canby, and that's Drazan's hood. I'm sure she's looking at what happened there and thinking about the many things a governor can do on school funding. But you also have legislators talking about making moves on how Oregon funds schools. And you have leaders in school districts saying that they're going to keep advocating at the state level for more funding, but also, solutions to PERS costs and better funding for special education.
Right. Okay. I want to be sure that we mention a few of the other races that we've been following this week. Here's one. Oregon's longest-serving member of the state legislature. This is Republican Representative Greg Smith. He's out in north central Oregon. I think he's from Heppner. He faced an incumbent challenge that was probably like his most legitimate primary opponent that he's had to face in some time, if ever. He still managed to win. He overcame some pretty serious controversy around allegations of state ethics violations, some of which were affirmed. Former Morrow County Commissioner Jim Doherty launched a campaign against him, but again, it was not successful. Smith will almost certainly be back in the legislature this coming session. Again, this is a pretty red area, so there's just almost no chance of a Democrat winning there. Looking ahead, we have some other races that we're keeping track of. There's a number of them in Washington County, both for the Oregon House and the Oregon Senate, where, they're really, really close. The results are still rolling in, and we're keeping an eye on those. And we will surely be back to talk about them in the future. Liz and Lauren, thank you both very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Bryce.
This week's episode of OPB Politics Now was recorded in the Gert Boyle studio. It was produced by Andrew Thien, and our audio engineer is Naleen Silva. Our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.